Alright guys, Brian with VetteSource here, checking back in as we continue our Formula 350 Yellow Gold project, our tune port injection teardown. And today, real quick, what I'm going to do, I'll figure out the cap on this, is start the process of rebuilding the cylinder head, or refreshening it up, if you will. I'm not really rebuilding, simply because I'm not doing the entire thing. We're not going to a machine shop. What we're doing is we're just going to freshen things up, clean the gasket surfaces off, valve seals, that kind of stuff. So the good thing about dealing with this type of part here is that it really doesn't require a whole lot of heavy-duty lifting or tools from that perspective. We're just talking about a cast iron head here. It's really not that crazy to deal with. Can't believe I can't get this razor blade thing working. But anyway, so if you've followed along with me before, you've seen where we got started on this video, or this series, you should say. It's kind of turned into more long-term than I wanted to, but we're going to keep going on it. Today, like I said, I've disassembled the cylinder head. If you've seen, valves are out of it, things of that nature. Everything's taken apart. Kind of did some cleanup on it. I'm doing some more detailed cleanup. Good thing about cast iron cylinder heads is that a lot of times you're just literally making sure there's not going to be excessive corrosion on these. Make sure your mating surfaces are clean, and you really don't even have to have crazy expensive tools. You know, I've got a pack of 3M stripping pads here, some steel wool, and some razor blades. And it's a little bit slower process, but cylinder heads are rather simple. And what I will do after I clean this up a little bit is I'll show you guys what's involved in putting the valves back in with new valve seals. Lord, I cannot keep from dropping my camera. So anyway, we'll do that for this one here. Let's make sure our camera position is correct again. Alright, so we're good on our position. So all I'm doing essentially is just scraping this down, getting the trash off of it, old gasket material. And again, this is just something, you know, when you're rebuilding a car, 20% of the rebuild is disassembly and reassemble, and 80% of it is just a cleanup, really. And that's, I think, honestly, as I've done this for, you know, decades now, a lot of people get in the weeds on it because either A, they don't like the idea of cleaning up, or it becomes a daunting task, right? And the truth is, cleanup is always the hardest thing to get done in a proper manner. Sometimes, you know, it just takes time. It takes away from the fun of actually assembling or putting it back together, but it's a necessary component of it, especially when we're talking about engines. You just don't want any excess trash going into your motor, messing things up. So it's better to have this done beforehand before you get it. So really, for me, what I do, especially with heads like this, if I'm not getting complicated, again, cast iron, I just clean them up, make sure I'm getting a lot of the excess gasket material off there, and the flash rust that inevitably shows up from an unpainted metal surface. You really have to try hard to mess these up. Leave them in a pool of salt water or something, because most of the time they're just gonna cooperate with you. And of course, off camera, I'll go through this a little more in depth, but I just wanted to show you guys some of the process of what we're doing here. And of course, I always enjoy the company while I'm working on stuff. You know, years ago when I had the shop where guys could come and hang out with me a lot, I always had company. Of course, when you're dealing with certain types of makes and models, people are always going to hang out, kind of like the guys in the barber shop, you know, the checkerboard in the corner. I always affectionately refer to it as, but it's always good to have company. So I do appreciate you guys guys and gals that are watching me. You know, sometimes just the process of working itself is what's enjoyable. Sometimes, especially when a lot of us have been locked down or can't go anywhere. Some states are worse than others, really. Texas, we're moving around pretty freely here. Of course, again, not going to get into discussion about what's fair and what's right, what's not, but you know, you got people that would limit your movement for the safety of others, and you know, obviously we've never collectively experienced something like this, but you know, it is what it is. So anyway, I'm just going to go over this real quick on the intake side, make sure it's cleaned up, and then of course I can even see extra gasket material that was there. And we'll work on that a little bit later off camera. So we're just basically, now I couldn't find my little piece of wooden board that I like to use, which kind of keeps me straight along here, but it's okay for what I'm doing. And this just goes to show too, you don't have to get complicated. You know, for the guys and gals both, that you've never worked on your car before, you know, hopefully with watching me, you can see that not a lot of this is extra complicated. It is kind of like doing a jigsaw puzzle, you know, but after a while, you can actually kind of see some of the processes here are just maintaining what the engineers have put together for us, which is cool. You know, as a kid, I always appreciated the fact cars being a complex piece of machinery, you know, and thought it was really unique the way they did this. So that's going to work on that for the moment. I'll deal with those later. Let's see, can you actually see what I'm doing right here? Let's see if you can see. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to basically take and clean up these combustion chamber areas. Now here's an interesting aside if you're not familiar with this and what I'm doing here. When we're talking about an internal combustion engine, right, the cylinder head is where the combustion actually takes place. So this little pocket in here, this little area, this is the electrode of the spark plug. This is your intake valve. This is your exhaust valve. This little pocket on these heads, I think, is 64 cc or 68. I think it's 68 on the iron heads, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 68, because the aluminums are 58 on the Corvettes. So anyway, this area we're talking about, cc, 68 cc, is not referring to centimeters. It's referring to combustion chamber. Okay, so yeah, it might be interchangeable. I never actually questioned it. 58 cc combustion, yeah, maybe, I don't know. So anyway, this area in here, this combustion chamber, right, is actually where the explosion, the controlled explosion of the fuel and air takes place, and this is what drives your piston down on the power stroke coming this way, and of course on the upstroke is when you're pushing the burnt fuel and air back out of the cylinder and the exhaust side. So it's just an interesting thing, and a lot of you people watching me may already know those basics of that, but if you don't, that's what this is. So you're looking at, this is where fuel comes in here, this is where the exhaust goes out over here. So anyway, yeah, we just cleaned the surface area up here. And of course, some of this, what you're seeing, is if you followed this video series already, this is that remainder, this in here is that stop leak that just went everywhere and created a mess inside these cylinders. And I really, honestly, cannot stand the liquid solutions to mechanical problems. But again, every mechanic has its own threshold and what he deems is appropriate and what's correct, but frankly, the liquid stock leak is kind of a lazy solution to a problem. I was kind of laughing because for grins I saw who was it? Was it Hoovy? Yeah, he took that Corvette, that 66 Corvette, and put a sealant, what was it, engine mechanic in a bottle or something in it, and then drove it down the road and was surprised it blew up on him. Which, you know, of course for him that's good for his views, but you know, you're like, really? Come on, man. So there's never an easy solution when it comes to that. Now again, on these flat surfaces too, even if you don't have your 3M pads, you can even just use steel wool, right? Not the really coarse, but more like the fine, and kind of just go through this. Now guys, I'm doing this the old-fashioned slow way, before they had electric tools or mechanical tools, and of course I've got to clean this up quite a bit before I just throw this all back together, because you don't want these pieces left in these cylinders. Obviously you don't want that going in there, but for me, I'm doing this kind of slow, old school, just so you can kind of see the process of what I'm doing to clean the cylinder head up. Now, amazingly enough, there's really not that much to these heads, assembly-wise, right? You've got a valve, you've got a spring, you've got the umbrella little cap that holds it in place, that holds that all in, and then you've got the locks on top of it, and that's it. So, as complicated as the cylinder head looks when you're first eyeballing it, it's really not that complicated overall. And again, we've got a car that's an older car with the original older motor. It's a little bit tired, but the truth is, this car is not going to be going back to a thrash them on the streets kind of vehicle. It's simply going to be a car that can be enjoyed, and I don't, you know, I do like speed quite a bit. I enjoy horsepower. I like watching drag racing, but I am not a street racer kind of guy. I never have been, because it's frankly, it's just kind of irresponsible, but I'm not going to get on a soapbox about that. But yeah, this motor here is not going to get pushed hard. It's not like we're going to be, you know, let's see if we can drag race it down the strip and see how much power we get out of it. It's nothing we need to worry about, really. So what we'll do is quite a bit. See all that material on there still? Now, if all else fails, right, I always say work with what you've got. If this stuff doesn't come off, then you can always just use a power tool, gasket remover. But this case, it's something you can do, and for fun, it just passes the time. Now I'm out here, of course, at 7:30 at night doing this, because the rest of the day has just been horrendous as far as how hot it's been. Today was actually quite warm, but again, we're in the middle of August, so I'm not really overly shocked. So what I'll end up doing, some of this job will be done off camera, but what I'll do for now is I'm going to show you guys how the valves actually just fit back in here again. Now, I think I did a video where I took the other cylinder head apart and showed some of that process. So let me go grab my valves real quick. All right, so here are the components for each individual cylinder. Excuse me. So looking at them, you can see, of course, I've got more cleanup to do on these, perform. like I said, we're just doing down and dirty bench rebuild. Now I did pre-clean this. I'll give you another trick that a lot of people miss, is that on a cylinder head, cast iron is okay. Aluminums, it's not usually recommended unless you're just going to get it off of there really quickly. But you can actually use oven cleaner on a cylinder head to clean off a lot of the gunk the deposits, the hard scale carbon deposits that'll come off. Now I just gave this one a cursory clean. I've still got to kind of get in here and take care of this, but I'll show you exactly how this works. So you've got obviously a spring, goes through here, there's your keeper, there's your cap on top of your keeper. Wait a minute, sorry, wrong way. Your umbrella cap, pivot mechanism, right? And then on here you've got your locks, right? See these two little grooves right here? Now this is where the oil ring goes. This is the thing, the valve seal, not oil ring, but the valve seal. This is what everybody complains about. It's leaking. If you've ever seen an older car that'll puff smoke on startup, that's what's leaking. And what happens, the oil seeps down that through there and it gets into the combustion chamber. Normally it's not as bad on the exhaust side. You're not going to see it. It's once it gets in the combustion in the intake valves. So there will be your oil ring, and there's your lock that holds everything in place. And then once it's put together, that's the way that looks when you've got that installed, right? So your valve here, and then what happens, your rocker arms are just going to push down on top of this right here, your stamp steel, and they're just going to pivot from the action of the camshaft and push that down. So that's really all there is to it. It's not complex, but when you're looking at a cylinder head installed, or when it's all put together, it looks rather intimidating. So on this point here, what we do is we're just going to, let me turn this a little bit so you can see it. So you see here, number one, that would be our exhaust side. And I'm just pushing that through there. And what happens on the flip side is I push it on this way and it comes up through the top right there. And there is that oil ring, that oil seal right there, and then those keepers right there. So let's see if that's right so you can see it. So all you do when you reinstall these, and I'll show you once I'm done cleaning, is that goes on top of there, right? These two fit here, and then we're going to use the spring compressor to bring that down. And then once we bring that down, it's going to allow me to put those little keepers inside of there and lock that thing into place and make it so it won't move. So it's a pretty neat process. So I'm going to go ahead and finish cleaning this off camera to the point that I need it to make it look pretty. And then we'll go ahead and reassemble it here in just a second. All right, so let's go ahead and finish this up, getting these valves back in here. So as you can see, this is a little bit later than where we started, or where I left off here just a second ago, simply because, as usual, other things got in the way for me doing this. So what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna go ahead and throw back in our number one exhaust and our number one intake valve for you, so you can see what happens with that. And of course, it's ridiculously simple. The amount of parts here, really not that much. I think I showed you in our other segment we did here. So you've got obviously valve, spring, retainer, cap, retainer, roller, and then of course these go up here on top. So I'm just going to put these in real quick, try to get this process done. So this seems to be the one that takes the longest for some odd reason. So you know, essentially we've got this cleaned up again. So we're going to go ahead and just insert our valve. I'm going to show you guys how low stress this actually is, and you'll see our valve stem comes up right there. Let's go ahead and position this camera so you can see. And we've got that in there. We're going to go ahead and set this down where it needs to go, so it will theoretically hold that in there. Let's see here. Let's get this in a better spot. Let's see. Let's see if I can find a good position for that. I want that just a little bit higher. Hang on just a second. I'll walk around to this. Okay, I'll have to work with that. So, make sure we're still showing what we're doing here. So, again, you can see, got keepers, and then of course this is where our valve seal goes, which causes lots of failure points, lots of aggravation. So, we're gonna put, oh, what am I doing there? So, we're gonna go ahead and preload this thing here. Assemble it first. I seem to be getting ahead of myself today. So we're going to preload this thing. I can get this in the right spot. And all I'm doing is compressing this manually or beforehand so I can get this in place. Now, the one tricky thing I will say about these is you can go ahead and put these on first, right? The valve seals, the new seals on here. You want to make sure you get that down to the second one. And then make sure it's fully seated where it needs to be. And then go ahead and get that down there. And you've got to kind of watch this as it's going through. Actually, you know what? I think I got this backwards. Hang on. Every time I do this, I always get the wrong position of where I want to go with it. That's right. So what I do first is I put this on first. Then we're going to go ahead and push this down real carefully. I'm going to pick. There's our first position there. I'm going to keep on moving to the second position, which you really can't see because it's behind here. Because the valve stem is actually, the seal is just big enough to where it fills that space completely. And what happens if you try to put the spring back over the top of it, what ends up happening is you end up pulling it out of place and pulling it too far down. Alright, so we've got that in place. Yeah. And then all we're going to do is stick our keepers back in here. That they're seated. There we go. So you guys can see this. And then I'm just going to go ahead while I try to have three hands here. And there it is. Now looking from the side, I can see that my valve seal is positioned where it needs to be on that second groove. So I'm in good shape. So there's one. So I'm gonna go ahead and start taking care of our second one here. And same thing, we're just gonna go ahead, put that through there. Clean off that mess. It should not be in there. Thought I cleaned that one out already. Okay, that one's in. And we'll go ahead and set this down. Not try to smash my hand there. Okay, we are positioned. Okay, going to again just collapse these, compress. Oh, you know what, guys? I can't believe I just sat there and forgot that, but I'm gonna end up having to take that back off again because I need to put that back on there later, but I'll do that later. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and first off, let's get this back out of here again. First things first, we want to put the lower umbrella seal on there. Those are pretty tight fit. These are meant obviously to keep oil off at the base. All right. Okay. Alright. Let's put that one there. Let's go ahead and get that valve back in there again. Alright. There's that in there. Okay. Get our valve seal. Oh, actually, take that back. I do this every single time I go to put these back together again. It's just a habit. Okay. Get that valve seal in there. There's our first position. And let's move that down to our second position. And be careful too when you're doing this so you don't roll it. Okay. And there's our second position. Okay. And then we're just going to go ahead and put the keepers in. There's one. There's two. And make sure that they're together like that. You might be able to see that from there. Oops. As I drop it, I had it perfectly. There we go. we go. All right, so that operation there, guys, is just times 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One exhaust, one intake. So that's basically it for today. I'm gonna do the rest of these off camera because I gotta go ahead and clean up the flash chrome or flash rust that got on here from leaving this in the back of my truck. Keep creating more work for myself. That's a good thing about cast iron. You can just go ahead and leave it and then clean it up, but I hate doing the same job twice. So anyway, we got those 2 in. We'll have these other ones in off camera. I'll go ahead and get this reinstalled, and then next week or the week after, we will try to go ahead and see about putting that intake back, getting that tune port injection intake back on our Formula 350, our yellow Formula 350, as we climb or get our butts back out of the rabbit hole that we fell down into with this. And if you haven't seen the long-term project this has become, you can check my playlist. You'll see where I started this about a year ago, a little over a year ago. I started doing this, but with everything else that gets in the way of running a Corvette parts business, sometimes this gets your projects, side projects get behind. So anyway, that's gonna wrap things up finally for this video, guys, and I'll be back with you next week. We'll see you all then.